morning to all of you here. I can't see many of you, but it's really my pleasure, my fellow speakers, all the institution heads here. It's my pleasure to be here. Before I start, I must say, it's a wonderful experience to be part of TED, because my son, who's 19 years old, I remember, when he was growing up at the age of 11 or 12, I gave him a summer holiday assignment. I told him one simple thing. I said, you must watch one TED video every day during your summer holidays, and then give me 3 lines on what you understood from the TED video. And believe me, it sort of transformed him, okay? He's doing his design now at Srishti School, Bangalore. The reason I have this slide is, this was one of his first output on the visual communication, okay? So with that, let me jump in. It's really a pleasure. I'm going to be talking about startups, investing in startups, why you should be involved in startups. I think it's the most exciting thing. Right from Mr. Ratan Tata to Prime Minister Modi to every person who's involved. I think Mr. Sri Ravi Shankar is also involved in startups now, so it's amazing. Yeah. Okay, so from the other side, right? So I'm sort of on the VC side. I invest in startups. I'm a part of several angel networks. But more than investment, I enjoy mentoring startups. I have a bunch of companies. I've invested in about 12 startups so far, 3 or 4 of them in Hyderabad, few of them pan-India. I have a startup investment in the Valley too. 2 lady founders who founded an interesting startup called Activity Hero. So let me jump in. Why do I invest in startups? Okay, so it's a long story. I think partly covered in the introduction. Way back 1994-95, I was among the first few employees of a startup. I was among the founding team, among the first 10 team members. I joined as the head of finance. It was an IT company called Sierra Atlantic, which went on to grow from a small sapling to a reasonably sized oak tree before we were acquired by Hitachi Consulting. And actually, that was the only company I worked for all my life, 20 years. Okay, so that brings me to startups, right? I was the beneficiary of a startup ecosystem. It was amazing. It was a great learning. You learn everything about business, okay? So one of the things I always tell youngsters, even as they used to join Sierra Atlantic and Hitachi, you often have opportunities to join large companies which have 1 lakh and 2 lakh employees. But if you get a chance to join a smaller company, it can be risky. It's not so secure. Maybe your marriage prospects are a little diluted if you are not working for Infosys or Accenture, but for a Sierra Atlantic or XYZ. But believe me, the learning is amazing. Okay, so it's definitely worth taking a risk, exploring. But what you learn is far, far more. In large companies, you get siloed into smaller segments of learning. But in smaller companies, you do everything. Okay, so it's extremely interesting. Why do I invest? I find it, there's a great learning. I enjoy searching for diamonds in the rough, pretty much spending my time with a lot of you youngsters, learning every day, being able to help them across, while designing the business, while picking up ideas, helping them to examine what are the risks involved, what they should be doing, how they should be doing few of those things. So that really, is very, very exciting. Doing something wrong? Okay, yeah. Okay, so where was I? Yeah. Why do I invest in startups? So let me jump to the next slide. Evaluating startup ventures. I'm sure, I can't see you people, but how many of you are sort of planning to become entrepreneurs in the next 2 to 5 years? Can I see a raise of hands? Okay, maybe 5, 10, 15%, right? Amazing. So that's really good. So let me spend a few minutes on that, right? What do people look for when evaluating startups? From the investment angle, from a employee angle, from a future angle, right? So basically, it's the idea, and it's very important. One aspect which a lot of founders, young founders, often sort of they sort of get carried away in a romantic view of startups. Okay, so they start with a solution. That's not right. You can't start with a solution and start searching for problems to solve with your solution, because that can trip you up, right? You fall too much in love with your solution. That's not the right way. You have to look at starting with a problem, a genuine problem which can be addressed, right? So what did Uber do? Uber basically started with trying to solve a problem about commuting, about transportation, and doing it reasonably, doing it elegantly, doing it easily, right? So those are the aspects which become very important. So what is the business problem which is being addressed? What's the size of the market? What's the size of the addressable market? Because, frankly, investors, early stage investors, believe it or not, are taking the highest risk possible. They are putting in money into ventures which have a success rate of, can anybody take a guess? What's the success rate of startups? Out of every 100 startups which start, how many succeed? 1%, 30%? Yeah, so it's about 5%, okay? So there is a mortality rate of 95%. It's shocking, right? How many of you would put your hard-earned money or not so hard-earned money, inherited money, or whatever money into a venture which you think has only 5% chances of succeeding? That can be a little risky, right? So that's the reason early stage investors understand that risk and they evaluate startups much closer than they would evaluate other investments, okay? So that's very important. So the business needs to have a large potential market. The solution which you have built needs to be differentiated enough to be able to get a market share in that market, right? There has to be something unique, something original, something. It need not be a IP. It need not be, something which you have patent or exclusivity. Frankly, a lot of startups start in industries, there are multiple startups, but the way to differentiate is to reach that customer delight. Do it better, do it differently, spend a lot more attention on details than what others are doing, and you will succeed. So that's extremely important. How differentiated is the solution? What is the competitor landscape? It's okay to have competition because that means that there is a lot of potential in that market. So you should never worry about having competition, but find ways to do things better, do things differently. Okay. What's the pedigree of the founding team? I think that's one of the most important aspects which investors in startups look for. Frankly, everything else is secondary. Because at such an early stage, you really feel like a teacher who's teaching a kindergarten kid and trying to, predict whether this child will go to IIT and this child will go to GITAM and this child will go to Stanford University, right? It's a tough call, okay? So you are looking at various aspects of personality, of DNA, of background, which can begin to give you, hints about it. And once you spend a year or two with the child, I'm sure all the teachers and the professors here can confirm what I'm saying, that you begin to see certain traits among people. That's what early stage investors look for, okay? So the founding team is very important. While at the founding team, very important, ideally you should have a 2 to 3 member founding team, because being an entrepreneur is a tough job. It's a very lonely job, right? So there are, 2 to 3 core activities which you have to manage. One is the actual operations of the business, where you handle, the day-to-day aspects of whatever business you are in. It could be a manufacturing startup, a services startup, it could be an online marketplace, whatever. So that's a core aspect, the operations. There's a customer-facing aspect, which is really acquiring customers, managing their expectations, delighting them, and there is a technology aspect. One of the things, again, I must mention to the GITAM students, right, very technology-intensive students here, that a lot of founders overestimate the weightage on technology. It's very important. Technology is a facilitator. The technology part of your startup's weightage can be no more than 15 or 20%. Don't just assume that 3 of you tech guys can get together and found a startup and everything else happens, okay? It's very important to stay humble, stay clear that technology will help you, but there are core aspects of the business which you need to understand, you need to soak yourself, and that's the way you can do things better, okay? So very key aspects there. What's the long-term plans? Does it really have a financial model which can, let's say, a bunch of us, 3 of us are investing in a startup. We are investing 1 crore rupees at a valuation of 5 crores. Because of the very low success rate, the expectation is that in 3 to 5 years time, can this business become 20x or 30x of the valuation at which we have invested? So if you are investing 1 crore at a 5 crore valuation, can this business support 100 crores of valuation in 3 years' time? So those are the aspects which become extremely important, right? What is the path to glory, right? Can this business grow? And while at that, I must tell you, I think there is this wholly romantic notion today, it's like if I'm a aspiring film star, I look at a Bahubali's success, or I look at a Shah Rukh Khan and Amir Khan, and I think that I can become that, or a Sachin Tendulkar or a Kohli, right? Was a lot of effort has gone into what has created a Sachin Tendulkar or Kohli or Amir Khan or whoever, right? The same applies in startups. There are too many young founders today who are looking at a Flipkart and a Snapdeal and a Uber and whatever, and thinking that I can start today, in 2 years' time I'll get funding, in 4 years' time I'll be worth 100 crores, I can buy my Lamborghini or whatever. Okay, it's a 15-year minimum commitment. You must be very clear about that. There is no business enterprise which can be, maybe by chance, you stumble upon something which is enormously differentiated. After 2 years, some competitor comes and pays you an obscene amount and acquires you. That's fine. That's chance. If that happens, well and good. But be prepared that this is a marathon. It's actually a triathlon. Okay, it's not even a marathon. Be prepared for that. Build yourself for that. Condition yourself for that, and then you'll be definitely successful. Okay. So yeah, I covered most of these points. Interest of time, let me jump. What are key founder attributes to be successful, right? Chutzpah. Chutzpah is a term I'll come across later in the Israeli connection. It's basically a readiness to be different, a readiness to take risk, a readiness to jump in and do things, right? Very important. Integrity, extremely important. I think throughout life, like our parents teach us, like our elders teach us, you must never compromise on integrity. I've seen that through my life, right? You can tell a lie, you can do few things, while you think nobody is watching, but it comes back. It comes back very badly to hit you. Don't do that. Don't take shortcuts. Don't do funny things. Whatever you're doing, do it clearly. If you have failed, go and tell your investor, you know what, I tried, I failed, this happened, but I'm going to do something now, and I will come back and make this better. It's always better. Okay. Curiosity, very important. Again, for youngsters, I find this all the time. I tell my kids, daughter 23, son 19. I think youngsters think that they know everything in life, so you start getting bored. Okay. Bored is a function of, if you have achieved saturation in your knowledge, then you can get bored. If you have not, you can never get bored, right? So try to learn. And that's what TED is all about. TED is about opening new windows to the world. TED is about cross-pollinating knowledge to apply to whatever you are doing, or just to learn for the sake of learning, because you don't know when that will come. It's like a nice fixed deposit. That part of knowledge will come in useful to you at a very different stage. Keep that curiosity. Fire in the belly, we all understand that, right? Never say die. Yeah. Always ready to go and make it happen. A lot of your organizers have a lot of fire in the belly, so I must compliment them on that. Good. High emotional content. Again, extremely important. I think in today's world, people are missing out in the, clear pursuit of career and money and everything, which is very important, but don't miss out on the sensitivity part. It's all about people. Finally, entrepreneurship is about people. It's about understanding your customer, it's about understanding your team, it's about understanding every stakeholder which you have. Extremely important. Never say die, I covered that. And the central part, clarity of purpose, right? Why am I doing what I am doing? Raison d'etre, as they say, the reason for life. So you have to be very clear, have your clarity of purpose, share that with your team, share that with your customers, stay on course. Extremely important. Quick one, paths to glory, right? So, this is not my, I've sort of, taken it from a available public source, but you pretty much start, that's the revenue on the y-axis and time on the x-axis. So when you start, you have, zero revenue, you are losing money, right? So there is what is called a valley of death. I hope you guys can see it from the top, right? So the valley of death is when you are losing money, you are investing, you are at pre-revenue stage. So very few companies actually emerge from the value of death. As you emerge from there, you sort of break even, you start making some revenue. So the first period, the people who are investing in you are FFF, friends, family, and what's the last F? Anybody know? It's called fools. So early stage investing is about getting FFF, right? You have to find 3 Fs to invest in you, right? So people do, by the way, and I could be one of them, right? So then you sort of start making revenue, and you can go for an early stage investment. Then you go to the next stage. So as you mature, more investors come to you. One of the rule in life in investment is that if you are doing well, if you are in a good business, people will come to you. So not to worry. The whole world can go up and down. There can be a recession. A lot of bad things can be happening in the world. If you focus on your business, if you are, generating growth and profitable growth, there will be investors waiting to invest in you. That's a basic rule in life. It never changes. Whatever has happened in the last 3-4 years, a lot of people pursued growth just buying business by subsidizing, right? Selling a 200 rupee item for 50 rupees. That's totally, it was always unsustainable. It remains unsustainable. You can never grow an enterprise that way. So today everybody is saying, no, we need profitability and all. That was always required. Frankly, an enterprise which is built on short-term acquisition of customers by subsidies is an enterprise which will collapse when there is an earthquake of Richter scale 2. But if you have built an enterprise which is built on the fundamentals, long-term goals, which is profitable, which is growing well, it can sustain an earthquake scale of Richter 9.8, no problem. So that's the way you must always look at your venture. Okay. Why do 95% startups fail? And there's a lot of fine print there which even I can't read right now. But I thought youngsters should be aware of that, right? The first thing, like I said, building something which nobody wants. Big problem. Hiring poorly, right? Lack of focus. Failure to execute on sales and marketing, and a bunch of reasons. And this is something you can read up, right? But it's important. In fact, there is a website which is very interesting. It's a site which captures startup failures. And the site's name is autopsy.io. Now, isn't that a nice, intelligent name, right? Autopsy.io. But it's basically a repository for failed startups where the founders have written about why they felt they failed. Okay? So it's very interesting. If you are starting a startup, you must study failures. That's what education is about, right? That's what history, the study of history is about learning from your successes and failures. So it's very interesting. Some of the emerging growth frontiers, frankly, a lot of startups today are sort of, there's a herd mentality, both in startups and in VCs. But there are huge growth sectors which are happening. I just wanted to, open your minds to some of them. Artificial intelligence, all of you have been reading about the recent, Google computer victory over the Go champion, right? Go is far more complex than chess, one of the most complex decision requiring games in the world today. And there is a computer which beat the Go world champion 3 out of 4 games, okay? I think it just lost the 4th game to keep that guy happy, okay? So it's amazing, but that's the level of what artificial intelligence has achieved today, right? You must look at. There's robotics, there's drones, there's a lot happening there. In fact, around robotics, like I said, if you're reading, it has an impact on all of us in the world today. The great advancement in robotics is going to change the nature of jobs in the future, right? So less than 10% of jobs in the next 20 years will remain as we see them. So the whole requirement of skills are going to change, and you must be aware of that. Extremely important. Augmented reality, virtual reality. I would take agri. I have a fellow speaker today around social investing, sustainable environment impact aspects. There's water. I think a big problem. Frankly, we all live in a fool's paradise right now. But if this year we have a monsoon failure, we are going to face water wars very soon, right? So there are aspects, totally under-addressed aspects, which we can start new ventures in, and you can create real impact. So do look at that. So those are a few sprinkling of new areas coming up. A quick representation of what is called unicorns. Unicorns are basically startups which have achieved more than $1 billion in market capitalization. Okay, so you have a few Indian unicorns. There's Just Dial, there's Flipkart, there's Mu Sigma, very interesting company out of Bangalore in analytics space. Then there's a bunch of global, of course, right from Apple to Amazon to Netflix Slack, Paytm. So it's quite fascinating. I just thought, I would touch that very quickly. Flipkart, just wanted to share with you what happens in a typical startup life cycle, right? So the first capital which Flipkart raised was back in 2008, $1 million, right? And that's something some of you could raise next year or year after. And then 2010 and upward to the last raise in July 2015, $700 million. Last valuation at $16 billion. An amazing story, right? But if you look at 2008 to 2015, it's taken them 7 years. Both these founders used to work in Amazon for some time, worked in other corporates, and started on their own. I think what Mr. Narayan Murthy and Mr. Azim Premji and a lot of the IT founders did was change the image of brand India, right? They brought the concept that you can make money, you can pay your taxes without indulging in any form of corruption, you can create wealth. They changed the world for India in the global market and in the employee market. They changed the concept of employee compensation. Startups are the next big thing which is changing that again. The ability to create wealth without having capital, without having huge capital. IT did that in a services model. Startups are doing that, deploying technology. But the chance for a first generation entrepreneur to create an enormous wealth is what you're seeing from the startups. Okay. A quick mention about Chutzpah. I spoke to you about Israel. There's a very interesting book on Israel called The Startup Nation. Okay. So some of the human right aspects and all, one always questions. But I must share an interesting data point with you. Okay. So I spent 20 years in the IT industry, and India's total IT export revenues today are about $70 billion. Okay, it's good, it's great actually, but the average per capita revenue of an Indian IT engineer is about $50,000 per year. Average per capita of an Israeli IT person, engineer, is $300,000 per year, 6 times the productivity. So in startups today, Israel is the most important startup capital of the world. Small country, I mean, if you read through that, right, they have nothing, they have no natural resources, they are threatened by all the neighbors around. And like I said, I'm not commenting on the geopolitical part of it, but what is amazing is they have built a culture which is built on, there is no aspect of assumption, right? There is innovation, there is compulsory military service. There is 2 to 4 years of compulsory military service for gentlemen and ladies. It's not only for gentlemen. Singapore has it only for gentlemen, young boys, but in Israel it's for ladies also. And in that military service, they are taught the best of technology. They are taught not to accept authority just because it is stated authority. They are taught to think originally. They are taught to question. But that culture has created enormous amount of high value innovation. Okay, and that is the fascinating aspect of what Israel is about. They have 95% immigrant population, so there's a mix of cultures, there's a respect for meritocracy, and that's the fascinating part of Israel. So some lessons to learn from. Okay, quick points to ponder, and we can take that maybe during one of the lunch session or something. But I just wanted to point out the 10,000 hour rule basically says that you need to spend at least 5 years on something to become good at it. Not just 5 years. So, like we talked about, whether it's Sachin Tendulkar or, Bismillah Khan, the musician, the legendary musician, all these so-called super experts, not so-called, but actually, people who have mastered their field, they continue to practice for 12 to 16 hours per day. So, it's about putting in the right effort. It's about diligence. It's about attention to detail. The same applies to startups. Are we in a valuation bubble? Always a question mark, few companies go up, come down, but no, in the long run, I think it is true. From FOMO to JOMO. So this is interesting, a lot of investors jumped in as a herd mentality. FOMO is fear of missing out, okay? But as everything started crashing, there was what is called joy of missing out, JOMO. So FOMO to JOMO, okay? Now investors are happy that they didn't invest in a tiny owl or in some other food company which closed down, right? So that's very, it's very fashion driven, and that's not how businesses should be, right? Our VCs falling prey to a herd mentality and not doing original thinking. Yeah, in some cases one thinks so. Privately held unicorns, so Uber and various other companies, can they ever go public at those valuations? Uber's valuation, last valuation is $65 billion, okay? Crazy. Or Airbnb, okay? You all know about Airbnb. They don't own a single room. Uber does not own a single car. But Uber is valued more than the top two auto companies in the world today. Airbnb is valued more than the top two hotel chains in the world today. Just a tech platform in a way, right? Amazing. Warren Buffett's ABC. I really like to bring this in, Warren Buffett, of course, he does not, I don't know if he invests in startups, but his statement is very nice that the best of companies, the biggest of governments, the best of nations at some point fall, stumble because of three factors, and it applies to all of us in life: arrogance, bureaucracy, and complacency. Very nicely put. A, B, C. In life, you must never fall prey to any of these three: arrogance, bureaucracy, or complacency. Extremely important. That applies to startups too. How is the ecosystem growing? We partly covered that. So the last two, just nice quotes which I like to. So up to a point, I'll just read this out because I love it so much. Man's life is shaped by environment, heredity, movements and changes in the world around him, right? Parents, you can blame your parents, you can blame your friends, you can blame India, you can blame everybody, you can blame Gitam, whatever, right? Then there comes a time when it lies within his or her grasp to shape the clay of his life into the sort of thing he wishes to be. Only the weak blame parents, their race, their times, lack of good fortune, or the quirks of fate. Everyone has it within his power to say, this I am today, that I will be tomorrow, okay? And this is the last quote by Gandhiji, which applies to startups today, because he didn't know that it would apply to startups, but small body of determined spirits fired by an unquenchable faith in their mission can alter the course of history. I really love this, and thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed this interaction. Thank you.